Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
Good Wednesday morning on this June 24th. It's Vanessa Denha-Garmo filling in for my dear sister in Christ this morning, Teresa Tomeo. First order of business, happy birthdays to two of my nieces, Kira and Gia, celebrating their birthdays yesterday and today. So happy birthday blessings to them and all who celebrate their birthday today. We have a really rich and inspiring lineup today. Voices that will take us from the deserts of the early church to the streets of Atlanta, from Rome to the deep philosophical insights of one of the great Catholic minds of the 20th century. It's a day filled with faith, witness, and the fire of truth here on Catholic Connection. We're going to be beginning with a reflection on one of the most powerful figures in salvation history, St. John the Baptist. His life, his mission, and his martyrdom stand as a blazing testimony to courage and fidelity. In this book, Prophet of Fire, the witness of St. John the Baptist, Father Sean Davidson invites us to see St. John not only as the forerunner, the greatest of the prophets, but as a man consumed with the fire of God's love. Father Davidson walks us through the gospel scenes and that shaped his identity, his bold proclamation of truth, and his unwavering commitment to Christ and his singular mission, of course, to point all people to the Lamb of God. It's a timely meditation for our age, calling us to the same clarity, courage, and Eucharistic devotion that defined his life. So I'm really excited to talk about that book with Father here this morning. And then later, we're going to be turned to a very different kind of mission in the field, one that might surprise you. Ellison Lewell is co-host of the Morning Quest on AM 1160 Atlanta Catholic Radio, and she joins us to talk about the Quest outreach booth at the World Cup events in Atlanta. So this was Allison's vision to bring the joy of the Catholic faith right into the heart of the global excitement surrounding the games. I thought this was so cool because this is something that I love talking about all the time, hosting my own show, Epiphany, which is on the affiliate, EWTN, the affiliate here in Ann Arbor, Michigan. It is about how we connect, communicate, and collaborate with the community right in our own backyard. Talk about evangelizing the faith. And she's been on the ground almost every day, meeting people from all over the world, answering questions and praying with visitors and witnessing the Holy Spirit move into unexpected ways. We'll talk about her story from cradle Catholic to passionate evangelist, single mom, world traveler, and radio host, and how she's prepared for these moments in her life. And we'll hear about the encounters of the people whose lives she's touched. And so this is a great story, a great example of going out there and evangelizing, bringing Jesus to other people. I love this. And talk about bringing your faith to work. This really ties into a book I have coming out this fall with Marian Press, On the Job with Jesus. We're all called to carry him with us. Carry Jesus with us. And this is a great example of people doing that. We'll also check in, as Teresa always does, with Joan Lewis from Joan's Rome. She'll give us a quick look at what's happening in the Eternal City, from the summer heat sweeping across Europe to highlights from the Holy Father's general audience to the upcoming consistory of cardinals. Joan will also touch on the recent clarification from the dicastery for the doctrine of faith regarding lay people and homilies at Mass, and a response that has drawn attention, especially in the light of questions raised by German bishops. So as always, Joan brings clarity, context that is unmistakable Roman perspective. She's giving us that perspective from Rome. And then we'll be talking with Dr. Robert McNamara, who will guide us into the profound and beautiful thought of St. Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, Edith Stein. Dr. McNamara is one of today's leading scholars on Stein's philosophy, particularly her synthesis of Thomasan phenomena, her perspective on St. Thomas, of course, and we'll explore her understanding of the human person, her love for truth and goodness, and the intellectual and spiritual journey that led her from Judaism to atheism to Catholicism, and of course, ultimately, to the Carmelite habit. And we'll talk with Dr. McNamara about her today. She's one of my favorites. So much going on here on Catholic Connection. I'm Vanessa Denha-Garmo, filling in for Teresa Tomeo here. And as we approach 5 minutes past the hour here on Catholic Connection, it's time for the news on EWTN. We're going to start with a weather update, and Tammy Trio gives us the latest on the weather around the country.
There's dangerous heat across the east and severe thunderstorms from the northern plains into the Great Lakes. That powerful heat dome continues to grip the Midwest, Great Lakes, Northeast, and Mid-Atlantic as temperatures soar to near 100 degrees from St. Louis and Chicago to Philadelphia, New York City, and Boston. Meanwhile, a cold front is pushing through the northern plains and upper Midwest, and that's sparking showers and thunderstorms from Montana and the Dakotas through Minnesota, Wisconsin, and northern Michigan. Some of those could become severe. Across the central plains, scattered thunderstorms are possible as temperatures reach the low 90s, and thunderstorms are also likely in the south and along the Gulf Coast, where it remains hot and humid with highs in the mid-90s. The desert southwest is topping out at 116 degrees across Arizona, southern Nevada, and southeastern California, while along the west coast, northern California stays mainly in the 70s. Southern California will reach the mid-90s, and the Pacific Northwest can expect mostly sunny skies as highs reach the low 80s. That's your national forecast. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
The Vatican has released the schedule for Pope Leo XIV's extraordinary consistory with the College of Cardinals set for June 26th and the 27th. The two-day gathering will focus on the state of the church and the world, the pursuit of peace, and the next steps in implementing the synod. This will be the second consistory of Pope Leo's pontificate following January's meeting of 170 cardinals. According to the Vatican News, this session will follow a synodal format with prayer, science, small group discussions, and plenary reports. Cardinals have been asked to maintain confidentiality to encourage open dialogue. The consistory opens Friday with Mass at St. Peter's Basilica, followed by sessions on proclaiming the gospel in today's world and confronting the culture of power. Saturday's discussions will address building the common good and the path towards synod implementation. The meeting concludes with an address from Pope Leo XIV and a shared dinner. The Pope will then celebrate Mass for the solemnity of Saints Peter and Paul on June 29th. The Senate has followed the House in passing the War Powers Resolution on Iran, marking the first time both chambers of Congress approved such measure. Speaking shortly after last night's vote, correspondent Mitch McCann says passage is mostly symbolic because it doesn't carry the force of law.
The Republican Senator Jim Risch, who is also the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, said this evening that whatever happens with this, it's going to have no effect. And he said Mr. Trump will not pay any attention to it. At the same time, it could be politically effective in building more pressure on the administration.
The resolution seeks to end the Iran conflict without Congress declaring war or authorizing the use of military force. The Senate vote was 50-48 with 4 Republicans, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska and Kentucky's Rand Paul, Susan Collins of Maine, and Bill Cassidy of Louisiana joining the majority of Democrats. The U.S. will allow Iran to sell oil under a temporary 60-day license. Tammy Trujillo has that story.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent announced the move in a social media post on Monday. He cited productive talks between Tehran and Washington over the weekend and noted the 60-day general license authorizes the production, delivery, and sale of Iranian oil. The U.S. Navy lifted its blockade of Iran's ports and coastal areas, clearing the way for oil supertankers to transit the Strait of Hormuz. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
President Trump is highlighting the U.S. economy. Mark Mayfield reports.
He spoke at the Mack Trucks facility in Macungie, Pennsylvania on Tuesday.
At long last, you finally have a president who is putting workers first, putting Pennsylvania first, and putting America first. We're doing that, and we're doing it like nobody's ever seen before.
The president touted his economic policies, including his tariff plan that aimed to get companies to build factories in the U.S. Trump's stop in Pennsylvania comes with the midterm elections looming. Macungie is in what is seen as a key House district in the midterms. I'm Mark Mayfield.
A nonprofit that helps people with vision loss is raising awareness about blindness, which is on the rise in America. Tammy Trujillo.
The company called Visions out of Spring Valley, New York, says there's been a recent technology boom in devices to aid the visually impaired to keep them working or performing everyday tasks.
Most older Americans, it's a matter of when, not if. Most older Americans will be struggling with vision loss, and then communities who have higher incidence of diabetes.
Vision CEO Molly Egan recommends people get an eye exam if they're starting to experience vision issues and then look into vision rehab services. The CDC says 12 million Americans 40 or older have visual impairment. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
Another Amazon Prime Day is underway, but shoppers now have a few days to look for the best deals. Natalie Migliori has more.
What originally started out as a one-day extravaganza for the most desired discounts now lasts 4 days, with experts saying Amazon Prime members should be looking for deals on Amazon-owned brands like Ring cameras, Kindles, and smart home devices. The shopping pro suggests holding off on buying large household items like mattresses or grills until July 4th sales. Amazon says it'll be rolling out new deals every day, suggesting users take advantage of the AI shopping tool to track regular price drops. In New York, I'm Natalie Migliori.
Wall Street is closing lower as tech sell-off picked up steam. Jonathan O'Halloran reports.
Shares of Micron Technology dropped more than 10%, with Marvell and SanDisk also falling sharply. Alphabet added to the downward pressure, although stocks trimmed some losses in late trading. At the closing bell, the Dow Jones Industrial Average lost 45 points to 51,666. The S&P 500 fell 107 points to 73,65, and the Nasdaq dropping 579 points to 25,587. I'm Jonathan O'Halloran.
New questions are being asked about GLP-1 weight loss drugs and their potential to be used as performance-enhancing medication. Tammy Trio reports.
The weight loss drugs have become a popular health topic, but the focus on whether they can give an athlete a competitive edge stems from Serena Williams' official return to tennis after a 4-year hiatus. The 23-time Grand Slam winning superstar admitted to using a GLP-1 medication to get back in shape and drop over 30 pounds. Fitness expert Jillian Michaels and former pro tennis player Patrick McEnroe were asked to weigh in on the matter during an interview with Chris Cuomo, and both said they don't believe the medication will enhance performance. Michaels said that GLP-1 are not performance enhancers like stimulants or steroids. Rather, the benefits are likely from the halo effect of her weight loss. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
President Trump is set to host tonight's kickoff celebration of the Great American State Fair. The event is at the National Mall, is being billed as a patriotic opening ceremony to launch Freedom 250's first of its kind World Fair. The fair organizer says all 50 states and U.S. territories will be represented. The Mega Millions jackpot is up nearly $500 million after no one won last night's lottery drawing. Millions across the country were hoping to win $467 million in Tuesday's drawing, but nobody matched all 6 numbers, so the grand prize rolls over to Friday's drawing when it will be worth $489 million. The cash option on that is more than $220 million. Google's parent company, Alphabet, is officially joining the Dow Jones Industrial Average. It'll be replacing Verizon. Google will join companies like Apple, Nvidia, and Microsoft among the mega cap names that make up the 30 stock index. Tiger Woods is making his first public appearance since getting out of rehab. The 50-year-old golfer was charged with suspicion of driving under the influence in March after being involved in a rollover car accident on the Florida coast and was given the option of rehabilitation. TMZ says he's been getting rehab in Switzerland since early April and returned to Florida briefly last month to support his girlfriend Vanessa Trump during her breast cancer treatment. Woods finished rehab about 2 weeks ago and made his first public appearance on Tuesday when he delivered remarks at a PGA Tour event in Connecticut. It's 14 minutes past the hour here on Catholic Connection. I'm Vanessa Denha-Garmo, filling in for my dear sister in Christ this morning, Teresa Tomeo. We'll be right back after this. Prophet of Fire, the witness of St. John the Baptist, written by our next guest, Father Sean Davison, published by Emmaus Road Publishing, and forward written by Scott Hahn. And that's what we're talking about today. St. John the Baptist, the towering biblical figure, has been called the forerunner, the last and greatest of prophets, and the greatest among those born of women. That's from the Gospel of Matthew. And now Father Sean Davidson points to another worthy title for the cousin of Christ, the Prophet of Fire. Father, thank you so much for joining us here today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So tell us where this title, the Prophet of Fire, comes from.
Well, I think St. John the Baptist is known for being quite a fiery character. That's certainly one thing that comes across when you hear his preaching. His great call to conversion, and all that went with that. And then fire comes up, multiple times in the course of what he says. One very interesting thing that he says is that Jesus is going to baptize us with the Holy Spirit and with fire. I think we often remember the first part of that, but we forget the second part of it. So it's quite an extraordinary thing to have said, that Jesus is going to bring into the world a baptism of the Holy Spirit and of fire. The Catechism says that fire is the transforming energy of the Holy Spirit. So just as fire, kind of consumes what it comes in contact with, makes it one with itself, its own flame, in the same sense, the Holy Spirit wants to make us one with himself, with his own holiness, his own love. So we're called to be divinized, transformed by the graces that began in baptism.
So, Father Sean, what inspired you to want to write this book, The Prophet of Fire, The Witness of John the Baptist, and right now? Why now, and why this book?
Well, I think he's an endlessly fascinating figure, really. He's quite intriguing. Initially, I have to say, I didn't have too much devotion to him. I was kind of a bit intimidated by his fiery words, as we mentioned. But then I read a very beautiful book on him about 10 years ago now by a man called Father Joan, a 20th century theologian who really opened up the figure of St. John the Baptist for me. And I have to say, kind of humanized the figure of the Baptist. Because, I just had an image of him off in the wilderness, locusts, wild honey, living on his own, and not something I could identify with. But Father Danielou really made him, come home to me, sort of in some sense, and I began to warm to him and draw near to his example and his witness. And what Father Danielou really did was showed that, in some sense, there may be an explanation for the reason why he was in the wilderness and what he was doing. We won't have a great deal of time to go into it now on the radio, but I've explained it in the book. And when you understand something of maybe what he was doing during those years in the wilderness, where he was, the community perhaps he lived with, that, as I said, tends to kind of humanize him. So I just began to become intrigued by him. Then I began to meditate a lot on his image in the scriptures, and all the different texts that speak of him. And I began to use him for preaching retreats. And I found that people were fascinated and touched. There's just an awful lot that you can draw out for our spiritual life from all of those different texts. And so eventually I said, you know what, I've got these retreats. I may as well now try to put something on paper. And it really just flowed quite quickly when I tried to write the books. I thought perhaps the Lord was giving me the grace to do that.
So, Father, we're looking at marriage in the world today, and we've lost the sacredness, really, of marriage in the world. How does his martyrdom for the vocation of marriage offer us examples for the culture today? How do we look at his life and what we're looking at marriage in the culture today?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because, again, I think a lot of people tend to forget the precise reason why he dies. He was literally willing to lay down his life to uphold the sanctity of marriage. Herod had taken his brother's wife, Herodias, which is such a shocking thing for anyone to do. It's unimaginable, really. And John the Baptist called him out, brought him to basically a kind of act of fraternal correction, tried to make him convert. That's ultimately why Herodias was so angry with him and had him actually executed on the feast day on the birthday of Herod, which, imagine a birthday celebration being turned into such a scene of horror. But that's what happened. So he counted marriage holy enough to be willing to die for it. And there have been other saints down through the course of history, notably St. Thomas More, St. John Fisher here in England, who were willing to also suffer and die so as to, stay faithful to what they believed about marriage. In that case, it was Henry VIII trying to enter into a second union, even though he was already validly married. And because they wouldn't consent to that, they really suffered and died. So they were ultimately willing to die rather than sin against the holiness of marriage or lead others into sin. So John the Baptist is a kind of biblical proto-martyr for marriage, you could say. And I think, he basically just calls out the truth about marriage and the truth about sins against marriage. And I do think today that, we've drifted away so far in the Western world from the Christian truth about marriage. We're very, very confused about marriage and sexuality. And I do think that John the Baptist's example of courage, uncompromising attachment to the truth about marriage is something that we really need today. So perhaps he's a very powerful intercessor for us to invoke today in a special way.
Father, who did you write the book for? Who's the targeted audience?
Well, I think it's for anyone really who's interested in, going deeper into the spiritual life. I tried to draw out a lot of, as I said, truths from different writers, St. John of the Cross, Blessed Columba Marmion, that would really nourish our spiritual lives. I must say that priests and seminarians are the main people that I've given retreats to on the Feast of St. John the Baptist, or on the image of St. John the Baptist, and they seem to find him fascinating. So really it's for everybody, I would say, especially priests and seminarians, but for anyone. I do think it would make a good personal retreat. You know, sometimes people want to go away for a couple of days of silence, but they're not sure what to meditate on. So this book is quite rich in biblical insights and meditation. And I do think if you could just take that with you and just enter into it a few days of silence, or even from home, you know, just some kind of personal retreat, I think it would be very, very helpful for that.
How did it help you, you know, when you were writing this and going through the process, and you were thinking about your fellow priests in the process of writing it? How did it help you, Father, on your own faith journey? Were you able to kind of engage in a personal retreat as you were writing it?
Yes, I certainly was. Well, that's kind of how it began. I used all of the texts for my own 8-day silent retreat, and then out of that, I realized, oh, this is extraordinary. I get to share this with others. So definitely, it's touched me for a long time. But more recently, as I finished up the book, the thing that really stands out for me is that, you know, he says in John chapter 3, which I think is the most beautiful text about St. John the Baptist, that he says, I am not the bridegroom, but the friend of the bridegroom. He who has the bride is the bridegroom, and I rejoice just to hear his voice. So that idea of the friend of the bridegroom is so profound. What it is basically in the Jewish culture, it's something like a best man at a wedding. But in those days, it was the best man was basically more than a best man. He kind of organized the whole wedding, sent out the invitations. Because couples didn't spend that much time together before marriage, or hardly any time at all, the best man, we call him the shoshpen in Hebrew, he was kind of a mediator between the bridegroom and his bride. So he would send messages to his bride, send gifts to his bride through this trusted friend. So you would obviously choose your most loyal, your most trusted friend with whom you're going to now entrust your bride. And then on the day of the wedding itself, the shoshpen, the best man, the friend of the bridegroom, would bring them both together and then finally lead them to the bridal chamber so that they could finally be alone together and close the door on them. And his joy was just to know that they were now together and that this was their day and that they were filled with joy. So obviously, John the Baptist sees himself like that. And again, we don't think of that sometimes. We think of just the fiery prophet, but he sees himself as kind of officiating at a wedding or being involved. His whole life is about this wedding. And as priests, you know, that's really what we're doing. Our ministry is to help souls to be united to Jesus. Ultimately, that happens through the Eucharist. So Jesus gives himself, becomes one body, one flesh with his bride, the human soul, through the mystery of Holy Communion. So everything we're doing is preparing souls for that marriage, basically, for that spiritual marriage, for that wedding. So priests especially, but all of us, we can all play our part in preparing people to receive Holy Communion worthily and well, making a good confession, being burning with love and desire for Jesus. We can all do something like that, you know, in our own lives. So we're all, in some sense, friends of the bridegroom. But that's what I love the most about St. John the Baptist. That's what I want to reproduce in my life the most, to be a faithful friend of the Eucharistic bridegroom.
Thank you, Father Sean Davidson, the book Prophet of Fire on St. John the Baptist. Thank you for being with us. It is published by Emmaus Road Publishing, available on the EWTN Religious Catalog. Stay with us, everyone. Ellison DeLuel will be with us. We'll be talking about the Quest in Atlanta and the World Games. Don't go away. Allison DeLuel is co-host of The Morning Quest on AM 1160 Atlanta Catholic Radio. She's joining us here on Catholic Connection today to talk about the Quest Outreach booth at the World Cup events in Atlanta. Allison, thanks for joining us here today.
Oh, my pleasure. I mean, this is such a great conversation to have because it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing probably for me. And again, if any other states in this beautiful United States gets it, this is something great for people to do, have a booth, and just to be a witness to the world.
I love this, Allison, because it really ties into what I like to talk about on my radio program all the time is how do we connect, communicate, collaborate with the community right in our own backyard? And You're doing just that. So, and this is a great way to evangelize the faith. So tell us about this. How is it going? What inspired this for you?
So I am one of the hosts, like you said, for the Morning Quest here on AM 1160 The Quest. And you can also listen live on thequestatlanta.com or through our app. I am one of the co-hosts for the show, and I'm also spearheading outreach here for the Quest. And when I learned that the World Cup is coming to Atlanta, I'm like, what a great opportunity for us as Catholics to go out there and just to be a presence in the world in Atlanta to many, many that come by of our Catholic faith. And that presence could be just with a smile and a hello. So I spoke with Carol, our founder, gave her the idea. And I really felt strongly that this would be a great opportunity for us. And she agreed. And yeah, we have a booth at the World Cup. It's near the CNN Center and State Farm Arena for the whole month. So we are actually there in Atlanta the day before the game and the game day. And it just has been amazing. And we have such great support from the Archdiocese, and many, many parishioners from different parishes are coming on board and being a part of this as well. So I'm so grateful that we got to do this. It is life-changing for us volunteers being present, as well as for those that come to our booth.
So tell us, how does experiencing events like this help you on your own faith journey?
Oh, my gosh. Well, first of all, the Lord has been very kind and generous to me, and I love him so, so much. And he's given me these gifts personally, and it's beautiful how he is able to let me use these gifts, the gift of joy especially. So when people come up, again, like with a warm smile, we have a spinning wheel where people can win prizes, stress balls, soccer tattoos, soccer stickers, just many different cool ideas and things that kids would love and even parents would love. And it brings people to the booth. And when they see a smiling face of somebody that just wants to say hi and care about them, it's beautiful to see that. Some people might come up kind of skeptical, but when they see that we're genuine and that we are here just to be a pleasant person in their presence, all the guard goes down. It's pretty amazing to see it.
No, you've been at the booth almost every day. Do you have a memorable encounter or a conversation with a visitor that you could share with us?
Well, it's interesting. The first day we were there, and the visitor that I had was actually one of the vendors. Their child came up to me, and we have a prayer box as well. If people want to put a prayer request in, after we get all the prayers by the end of the month, we're going to have a mass said here at our Quest Chapel here at the studio. And this girl, she was probably maybe 12 years old. She comes up and with a beautiful smile on her face. And I'm like, hi, how are you? Do you have any prayer intentions? And she was kind of concerned, like she didn't know what that was. I was like, do you have any areas in your life that you would like to lift up to prayer, where God can help you with them? And her face just lit up even more. And she began writing things down and put them in there. And she's been coming to see us every single time we're there. So it's not even just international people that are encountering, the face of Christ here in Atlanta, at this big, big event. It's even the volunteers for other vendors. And the FIFA, the FIFA people that are working there have come by, and they're even amazed. Oh, wow, there's a Catholic radio station here in Atlanta. So again, just the presence of being there is amazing.
So people may think it's just an information booth, but it's really much more than that. What you're saying the visitors are experiencing. What else do you want to share about this experience and what it's meant for you and the team and everybody involved, and what example this is setting for other people around the country about evangelizing the faith?
So truly, what really touches me the most is I can't say that there is going to be another opportunity of being in the presence of so many different people, cultures, religions, those that don't have religion, where we are present right there in the center of it all. So I think that has been the most important thing, and it's kind of been eye-opening to us, because there are people that have been coming up to us that are Catholic from other parts of the world or other parts of the United States that are like, oh, wow, this is great to have you here. There might be people that are Muslim, or not even faith-filled that come up because they see our smiling faces, and we're there to share. We have cute little Quest fans for people to stay warm, because it definitely is very hot here in Atlanta. So again, just knowing that we are there with our happy, smiling faces, exuding Christ's love, has been so welcoming. And I think that's the key. It's not about when they come up, pouncing on them, with things. we open ourselves up to let them come in, and then we have great conversations, and there's no pressure, right? We're here. Everything is free. There's no cost for anything. All the other vendors are selling stuff. Everything we have is free, and we are just speaking from the heart. And people can tell. They notice that. I think people definitely walk away with an experience of, wow, they'll know Christians by our love, and I'm hoping and praying that they do. They walk off feeling that way, at least.
You know what I love? You said, they meet us with our smile, and I think that's so important. That's the first way how we communicate, our nonverbal cues. People
Absolutely.
You engage people by just your presence, and I think that's a great example of they'll see Jesus in you. What's been the experience like for all of you? What are you guys talking about going through this experience, the team there?
I mean, I think we have such great partners here within the Archdiocese. St. Paul Street Evangelization, local crew has been amazing. Yeah. Amazing coming through. Some of the guys on the crew go to local Catholic schools. They go to universities. So it's been interesting here at the World Cup experience because there are so many more people and they're used to kind of going one-on-one with people, where on game days it is packed full of people. So it's been interesting, but very, very rewarding. So I think they have been super duper helpful, and they are just talking about their experiences on conversations with people. A woman that came up to one of them, her husband died recently, right? And she is just starting to process it. So they were there to actually pray with them. We've had priests come as well. There was a couple, and the priest prayed over the couple because they were having struggles. So again, our presence, and I mean, when I say presence, I'm talking just being there, being a witness with Atlanta Catholic Radio, the Quest there, just showing them that we are here. We are here to come. We're here to pray with them. We are just there with a smile, welcoming them and showing them God's love.
Allison DeLuel, outreach coordinator and radio host at the Quest in Atlanta. We're talking about the Quest booth at the FIFA Games in Atlanta, Georgia. We've got about less than a minute left with you, Allison. What else do you want to share with our listeners here before we let you go on Catholic Connection?
Truly, what I would love to share is wherever the Lord places us, I think that the key is knowing Him, loving Him, and sharing our witness with others. I think that is so, so important, and being present to one another, no matter where we are, whether it's at work, whether it's at home with our families, whether it's with coworkers. We have got to be present with Christ's love exuding from our hearts to all that we meet. I think that is the key, being present to others wherever He calls you.
Amen. Joan Lewis, Joan's Rome, Vatican News is coming up next. Thank you, Allison DeLuel, for being with us here on Catholic Connection. God bless you and all that you do. Stay with us, everyone. Time to check in with our friend Joan Lewis from Joan's Rome, giving us a quick look at what's happening in the Eternal City from the summer heat sweeping across Europe to highlights from the Holy Father's general audience, the upcoming consistory of cardinals. Joan, welcome to Catholic Connection.
Well, it certainly is good to be with you. A week of so many different activities, as I outlined in our email exchange, before we go on the air. But the topic that really is on everybody's mind, I mean, if you work at the Vatican or something, all the things you named are the headlines. But if you simply live in Italy, the big thing is a heat wave. And we're okay. We're only mid to high 90s, but it's in triple digits in so many other parts of Europe. The southwest of France it was up to 115 or something like that yesterday. But what was so funny, and I posted this on my blog yesterday, there's an online news thing called thelocal.it. And here's what they published yesterday on Italy's heat wave. Italy is enveloped in yet another heat wave, with highs in the 90s expected through early next month. In a country where just 20% of buildings have air conditioning, it can be hard to manage these sustained high temperatures. Now, the Italian Health Ministry issues annual bulletins to give advice for keeping cool. The suggestions are useful, albeit very Italian. So here's what they came out with yesterday.
All right.
For starters, the Health Ministry has given everyone the green light to eat gelato for lunch.
I'll take that. I'll take that.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, my gosh, lunch, dinner, and anything in between. But, I mean, heck, if you can laugh during a heat wave like that, that's a pretty good thing. But, yeah, so lots of activity, and we're gearing up for a big weekend, of course, with the Holy Father and all the cardinals of the church. I don't know how many total will be here from all around the world, but the 2-day meeting, this is his second. He had one in January, too. But even shortly after he became Pope, Leo said that this type of meeting would be more common. And it's wonderful because, first of all, they get to know the Pope and hear what he has to say about things, which, of course, he says every day. I mean, he's on the news, so they can follow him wherever they are. But just to sit back and ask questions of the Pope in a very closed door, private meeting, listen to each other, learn more about your colleagues in the, in the College of Cardinals. And then when you do go to vote, in fact, last year, Leo got the highest number of votes. We don't know how that number was made available, but anyway, he was in the 3-digit and the highest number of votes, and the cardinals were getting to know each other in the days before the conclave began, and because when you get to know each other, it's not just, hey, what is your favorite, ice cream, or what's the name of your cathedral, but you also want to know a lot about church topics. And when you don't have a pope, you want to know, okay, what are the needs of the church now, and what kind of a man do we need, as Holy Father?
Sure.
But what is interesting about Leo's consultation with the entire College of Cardinals is that he has not named, and I don't believe he's going to, he's not named a group of 9 or 10 cardinals as Pope Francis had for years. It was called the C9, and he had cardinals from around the world that formed this little committee, and that he would listen to them, and they'd meet, I think it was every 4 times a year. And but the Holy Father, a lot of people felt that, okay, you could have access to the Holy Father if you had access to one of the cardinals, on this C9 body. But Pope Leo has decided, it seems very wise, to go with the entire College of Cardinals. And every living cardinal knows, no matter where he is living, that he can be in touch with the Pope any day of the year. If he has a question that he can also bring up in a very important matter when all the cardinals are together. And it's wonderful because, you're not going to have a daily, news report. Here's what Cardinal ABC said. And so it'll be very interesting. They're going to be looking at some internal questions to the church. They're going to be looking at the idea of synodality. They're going to be looking at the church in this world of so much violence and war, and how can the church, provide a background, or how can the church help bring about peace in these parts of the world. So it'll be a very interesting days, and actually a little alert went out to the cardinals that, they should be very careful in talking to the media these days. They're in Rome, but especially the 2 days, Friday and Saturday, of the meetings with the Pope. And, not to reveal, because the thing is, the cardinals want to be able to feel that they can speak freely. But, will there be 1 or 2 cardinals that feel that the world should know what was going on? Hopefully not. Yeah, hopefully it will be, very, very private. So, but we'll see in coming days, Oh, and then Sunday, of course, most of the cardinals, I think, will be in town for Monday. Monday the 29th is the big holiday here. It's the Feast of Saints Peter and Paul, who are apostles and patrons of Rome, and that's the day that the new archbishops, those that have been named archbishops since last June 29th, this coming Monday is the day that the new archbishops will receive their pallium from Pope Leo. So lots of reasons for all the eminences, all the red hats, to stay around Rome, even though I'm sure they'd rather be someplace closer to Antarctica, given the heat. But
So, Joe, going back to the consistory of cardinals, for people who may not be familiar of kind of what this looks like, the rundown, what will the cardinals be going through in this? What will this experience be like, the consistory of cardinals? Tell us what they'll be doing.
Well, actually, the Vatican did release the schedule. I posted it on my blog, and anybody who goes to vaticannews.va can find it. And it's going to be held in the Paul VI Hall, and basically the cardinals will be very much like the last synod, if you've got this image in your mind. The cardinals will be seated at tables. I'm not sure of the number, if it's 9 or 10 or something. They'll be seated at round tables in the synod hall. So they'll all have ways of being in touch with each other, at other tables. So, but it's not like the only people you're going to hear are those that are at your table. There will be somebody, I think, who gives a report, at each table, who will be responsible for summarizing the work, the conclusions, the suggestions that the cardinals at their table came up with. But so they'll be doing that Friday and Saturday, 4 different sessions. And as I said, they're going to be looking at how to build peace and the current situation of the church in the world, implementation of the synod, and has the meaning of synod, has it changed for Pope Leo on other, from the way that Pope Francis envisioned a synod? And of course, he had so many synods in his 12-year pontificate. So, but anyway, the agenda every day, I have no idea what Vatican News is going to do, but again, because most of this is, the 4 sessions will be considered utterly private, and there might be a photographer or video or something of the opening session where you would show the cardinals praying. It said, there will be a Mass on Friday. And but basically just a great big meeting of these eminent men wearing their red hats. And
yeah.
And then, I think it's nice that 2 days of meetings, and I'm sure Leo planned it this way. I'm sure after 2 days of meeting, and then Sundays might be considered, I guess, basically their day off. And then Monday to have this lovely event of the placing of the pallium, because this only happens in Rome. This doesn't happen anyplace else. Francis changed it for a while, changed the ceremonies, where palliums were placed on the archbishop's shoulder in their diocese. But now tradition has been brought back, and it's taking place in Rome.
So I want to switch gears a little bit, Joan Lewis here. Going back to the deliver homilies of the Mass Dicastery and the request from the German bishops concerning the laity and may not deliver homilies at Mass. Tell us a little more about this.
Yeah, that was a fascinating event. Yesterday, the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith came out with this clear statement, just, bullet points, and basically said this was in response to a request made by German bishops. And they wanted lay people to be able to preach the homily during Mass, even in exceptional cases. But the Dicastery said that the proclamation of the Word in the liturgical celebration, in other words, in Mass, is inseparable from the mission received sacramentally. And so up to this point, around the entire world in the Catholic Church, it has only been priests and deacons who can deliver a homily. And obviously a priest and a cardinal, a cardinal and a bishop, they're priests. But so priest and a deacon. But now it's made quite clear that is not to happen, and the Germans had asked for an indult to give temporary favor to people who might be needed but the Germans, they wanted even in exceptional circumstances, but they're not getting that either. So it's simply, the text said that the homily forms an integral part of the liturgy. We all know this every Sunday, or sometimes if daily Mass, priests deliver a homily. But the homily is intrinsically linked to the proclamation of the gospel and constitutes an exercise of the munus docendi, that's the teaching munus in trust to ordained ministers. And the document from the dicastery said the proclamation of the word within the liturgical celebration is inseparable from the mission received sacramentally and from the unity that binds together word and sacrament in the Eucharistic celebration. So you just simply have to see this relative to the ordination of a deacon, to the ordination of a priest. They are the ones who, because of that being an ordained minister, can give a homily. So I've been to masses in different places around the world where they've had guest speakers, not homilists. So, somebody may come from a charitable organization explaining that there will be a second collection for money for XYZ. But that's not the same thing as a homily anyway, so and should never be taken as a homily. But now we know.
Yeah.
You and I can do what we're doing right now on the radio. We may not ever think of delivering a homily.
No. I deliver my coach's commentaries, which I'll be delivering one in the next hour. But, we could share all kinds of commentary, but obviously it's not a homily, right?
Sure.
In our blogs, your blog is commentary, inspiring Catholics and keeping us up to date on what's going on in the Vatican. Joan Lewis, we have 30 seconds left with you. Last words before we let you go. Oh, it ran out of time. I'm sorry. Joan.
Oh, my goodness. Oh,
went by so fast.
Reset my clock, yeah. We fill it with lots of stuff, let me tell you.
Yeah, we sure do. Joan Lewis, always love talking to you. Thanks for being with us here on Catholic Connection.
And good talking to you, Vanessa.
Joan's Rome, Vatican News. Joan Lewis, we're going to wrap up this hour, talk about who's coming up, and EWTN Radio Extra. Don't go away. We're wrapping up this first hour here on Catholic Connection. Vanessa Denha-Garmo here, filling in for Teresa Tomeo. So happy to be with you. And thanks to all of our guests for joining us this hour. Father Sean Davidson, topic of Prophet of Fire, his book on St. John the Baptist, available at the EWTN Religious Catalog, published by Emmaus Road Publishing. Allison DeLuel with us, outreach coordinator and radio host at the Quest in Atlanta, talking with us about their booth that they have at the World Cup Games. And that's a great way to connect, communicate, and collaborate with the Catholic community right in your own backyard and the larger community, the community at large, right? Evangelizing the faith. And of course, Joan Lewis, Joan's Rome and Vatican News, keeping us updated of everything that's going on in the Vatican. Thanks for all of your insights and information that you share with Teresa every week here on Catholic Connection. We're going to head into EWTN Radio Extra next hour. I'll have my coach's commentary on the rise of Catholic radio programs and how more and more people are turning to Catholic radio. And then I'll talk a little bit on what leadership looks like. We need not just more leaders, we need better leaders. And that's my coach's commentary. Of course, I am a certified professional coach. I'm certified through the ICF, so I do leadership development, team building, and coaching, and I always share some coaches' commentary on leadership and the way we communicate, connect, and collaborate with people right here in our own backyard. Robert McNamara will also be with us to talk about one of my favorites, Edith Stein. So join us, EWTN Radio Extra.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
It's Vanessa Denha-Garmo, professional certified coach, filling in for Teresa Tomeo this morning. I focus a lot on professional development, leadership development, team building, creating thriving cultures, and the way we communicate that really influences our leadership style. I am so happy to be with all of you here today, here on Catholic Connection, hosting Epiphany regularly on our EWTN affiliate in Ann Arbor, Michigan on Ave Maria Radio. And today we'll be talking with Dr. Robert McNamara, Associate Professor of Philosophy at Franciscan University of Steubenville, Associate Series Editor of Edith Stein Studies, an Associate Scholar of the Hildebrand Project, an Associate Member of the Faculty at the International Theological Institute and the Maryvale Institute, and founding member of the Aquinas Institute of Ireland. And we'll be talking about one of my favorites, Edith Stein, of course, the personalism of Edith Stein, investigation of Stein's mature philosophical anthropology, exploring her engagement with the thought of Aquinas and Thomism while maintaining the phenomenological mode of investigation through careful examination of Stein's later works and under the themes of human nature, the human individual, and the human being's relation to God. It's one of my favorite saints. It's one of my favorites to be talking about. Discussing Saint Teresa Benedict of the Cross. Of course, Edith Stein, understanding of the human person and her love for truth and goodness. That is going to be our focus discussion here with Dr. McNamara, who will also be on EWTN Live with Father Mitch tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time. Guest on the televised Women of Grace with Jeanette Williams, of course. That's Monday, July 6th, Friday, July 10th, 1 p.m. Eastern Time and 12 p.m. Central Time. And then he will also be on EWTN Bookmark with Doug Keck that will air on a later date this summer. So very excited to talk with Dr. Robert McNamara, who is an expert on St. Teresa Benedict of the Cross, of course, Edith Stein, understanding the human person and her love for truth and goodness. So looking forward to that discussion. And of course, I'll be sharing a coach's commentary here today on Catholic Connection. And this is something that I brought to Teresa's attention a little while ago. We had a brief discussion about it. Nearly half of Americans listen to religious radio, and the momentum is growing. So Pew Research Center released new findings earlier this year that showing that nearly half of the U.S. adults listen to religious radio, confirms something many of us working in faith-based media have sensed for a long time. People are hungry for truth, clarity, and hope, and they're turning to Catholic and Christian broadcasting in remarkable numbers. This is really great for us because we're here to bring truth in Jesus Christ. It's why EWTN exists. It's why Mother Angelica founded this amazing network spanning all across the globe in different languages. And people are turning to Catholic radio. It's growing. And it's our way to evangelize the faith using this wonderful platform. And we're blessed to do so. And the way all of you can get involved is not just by listening, but sharing the programming, sharing what's going on all the different platforms produced by EWTN, radio, television, print, the publications online. We are a wealth, an amazing resource for people all over the globe. And this research study really just confirms what EWTN has known for many years. People are seeking truth in Jesus Christ. And that's why these platforms under the EWTN umbrella exist. And I'm so blessed to be part of it, even in a small little way. And so I'm going to be talking about that and, of course, a little bit on leadership in my coach's commentary here on EWTN Radio Extra Catholic Connection as I fill in for Teresa Tomeo this morning. But we're approaching 5 minutes past the hour here on Catholic Connection, and now it's time for the news on EWTN. And we're going to kick off this newscast this morning with a weather update from Tammy Trio.
There's dangerous heat across the east and severe thunderstorms from the northern plains into the Great Lakes. That powerful heat dome continues to grip the Midwest, Great Lakes, Northeast, and Mid-Atlantic as temperatures soar to near 100 degrees from St. Louis and Chicago to Philadelphia, New York City, and Boston. Meanwhile, a cold front is pushing through the northern plains and upper Midwest, and that's sparking showers and thunderstorms from Montana and the Dakotas through Minnesota, Wisconsin, and northern Michigan. Some of those could become severe. Across the central plains, scattered thunderstorms are possible as temperatures reach the low 90s. And thunderstorms are also likely in the south and along the Gulf Coast, where it remains hot and humid with highs in the mid-90s. The desert southwest is topping out at 116 degrees across Arizona, southern Nevada, and southeastern California. While along the west coast, northern California stays mainly in the 70s. Southern California will reach the mid-90s. And the Pacific Northwest can expect mostly sunny skies as highs reach the low 80s. That's your national forecast. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
The Vatican has released a schedule for Pope Leo XIV's extraordinary consistory with the College of Cardinals set for June 26th and the 27th. The two-day gathering will focus on the state of the church and the world, the pursuit of peace, and the next steps in implementing the synod. This will be the second consistory of Pope Leo's pontificate following January's meeting of 170 cardinals. According to the Vatican, the sessions will follow a synodal format with prayer, silence, small group discussions, and plenary reports. Cardinals have been asked to maintain confidentiality to encourage open dialogue. The consistory opens Friday with a mass at St. Peter's Basilica, followed by sessions on the proclaiming the gospel in today's world and confronting the culture of power. Saturday's discussions will address building the common good and the path towards synod implementation. The meeting concludes with an address from Pope Leo XIV and a shared dinner. The Pope will then celebrate Mass for Solemnity of St. Peter and Paul on June 29th. The Senate has followed the House in passing the War Powers Resolution on Iran, making the first time both chambers of Congress approves such a measure. Speaking shortly after last night's vote, correspondent Mitch McCann says passage is mostly symbolic because it doesn't carry the force of law.
The Republican Senator Jim Risch, who is also the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, said this evening that whatever happens with this, it's going to have no effect. And he said Mr. Trump will not pay any attention to it. At the same time, it could be politically effective in building more pressure on the administration.
The resolution seeks to end the Iran conflict without Congress declaring war or authorizing the use of military force. The Senate vote was 50-48, with 4 Republicans, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, Kentucky's Rand Paul, Susan Collins of Maine, and Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, joining the majority of Democrats. The U.S. will allow Iran to sell oil under a temporary 60-day license. Tammy Trio has details.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent announced the move in a social media post on Monday. He cited productive talks between Tehran and Washington over the weekend and noted the 60-day general license authorizes the production, delivery, and sale of Iranian oil. The U.S. Navy lifted its blockade of Iran's ports and coastal areas, clearing the way for oil supertankers to transit the Strait of Hormuz. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
President Trump is highlighting the U.S. economy. Mark Mayfield reports.
He spoke at the Mack Trucks facility in Macungie, Pennsylvania on Tuesday.
At long last, you finally have a president who is putting workers first, putting Pennsylvania first, and putting America first. We're doing that, and we're doing it like nobody's ever seen before.
The president touted his economic policies, including his tariff plan that aimed to get companies to build factories in the U.S. Trump's stop in Pennsylvania comes with the midterm elections looming. Macungie is in what is seen as a key House district in the midterms. I'm Mark Mayfield.
A nonprofit that helps people with vision loss is raising awareness about blindness, which is on the rise in America. Tammy Trio has that story.
The company called Visions out of Spring Valley, New York, says there's been a recent technology boom in devices to aid the visually impaired to keep them working or performing everyday tasks.
Most older Americans, it's a matter of when, not if. Most older Americans will be struggling with vision loss, and then communities who have higher incidence of diabetes.
Vision CEO Molly Egan recommends people get an eye exam if they're starting to experience vision issues and then look into vision rehab services. The CDC says 12 million Americans 40 or older have visual impairment. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
Another Amazon Prime Day is underway, but shoppers now have a few days to look for the best deals. Natalie Migliori has more.
What originally started out as a one-day extravaganza for the most desired discounts now lasts 4 days, with experts saying Amazon Prime members should be looking for deals on Amazon-owned brands like Ring cameras, Kindles, and smart home devices. The shopping pro suggests holding off on buying large household items like mattresses or grills until July 4th sales. Amazon says it'll be rolling out new deals every day, suggesting users take advantage of the AI shopping tool to track regular price drops. In New York, I'm Natalie Migliori.
Wall Street is closing lower as tech sell-off picked up steam. Jonathan O'Halloran reports.
Shares of Micron Technology dropped more than 10%, with Marvell and SanDisk also falling sharply. Alphabet added to the downward pressure, although stocks trimmed some losses in late trading. At the closing bell, the Dow Jones Industrial Average lost 45 points to 51,666. The S&P 500 fell 107 points to 73,65, and the Nasdaq dropping 579 points to 25,587. I'm Jonathan O'Halloran.
New questions are being asked about GLP-1 weight loss drugs and their potential to be used as performance-enhancing medication. Tammy Trio has more.
The weight loss drugs have become a popular health topic, but the focus on whether they can give an athlete a competitive edge stems from Serena Williams' official return to tennis after a 4-year hiatus. The 23-time Grand Slam winning superstar admitted to using a GLP-1 medication to get back in shape and drop over 30 pounds. Fitness expert Jillian Michaels and former pro tennis player Patrick McEnroe were asked to weigh in on the matter during an interview with Chris Cuomo, and both said they don't believe the medication will enhance performance. Michaels said that GLP-1 are not performance enhancers like stimulants or steroids. Rather, the benefits are likely from the halo effect of her weight loss. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
President Trump is set to host tonight's kickoff celebration of the Great American State Fair. The event at the National Mall is being billed as a patriotic opening ceremony to launch Freedom 250's first of its kind World Fair. The fair's organizer says all 50 states and U.S. territories will be represented. Well, the Mega Millions rolls over to $489 million. The Mega Millions jackpot is up to nearly $500 million after no one won last night's lottery drawing. The millions across the country were hoping to win $467 million in Tuesday's drawing, but nobody matched all 6 numbers. So the grand prize rolls over to Friday's drawing when it will be worth $489 million. The cash option on that is more than $220 million. Google's parent company Alphabet is officially joining the Dow Jones Industrial Average. It will be replacing Verizon. Google will join companies like Apple, Nvidia, and Microsoft among the mega cap names that make up the 30 stock index. Tiger Woods makes first public appearance since rehab. Tiger Woods is making his first public appearance since getting out of rehab. The 50-year-old golfer was charged with suspicion of driving under the influence in March after being involved in a rollover car accident on the Florida coast and was given the option of rehabilitation. TMZ says he's been getting rehab in Switzerland since early April and returned to Florida briefly last month to support his girlfriend, Vanessa Trump, during her breast cancer treatment. Woods finished rehab about 2 weeks ago and made his first public appearance on Tuesday when he delivered remarks at a PGA Tour event in Connecticut. It is approaching 14 minutes past the hour here on Catholic Connection. I'm Vanessa Denhagarmo, filling in for Teresa Tommy. When we come back, it's my coach's commentary. Don't go away. Time for my coach's commentary here on Catholic Connection. And just to kind of give you a little bit of background, I'm a professional certified coach, certified through the International Coaching Federation with my own company, Epiphany Communications. I just reached the PCC level after coaching for the last 7 years as part of my communications company. I've been a consultant for many years, since 2010 with my own company. I was an associate certified coach and met the criteria, passed an exam, which is whoo-hoo. I don't like standardized tests, but I recently did that, and now I'm a professional certified coach, sharing with you my coach's commentary today from a Catholic perspective. And I want to kick it off with this story that Teresa and I briefly discussed, and I kind of want to bring it back because I think it's so important to have this conversation. Nearly half Americans listen to religious radio, and the momentum is growing. So the Pew Research Center recently released new findings earlier this year showing that nearly half of U.S. adults listen to religious radio. It confirms something many of us working in faith-based media have sensed for a long time. People are hungry for truth. and hope and clarity. And that's what we strive to give you here every single day on EWTN. They're turning to Catholic and Christian broadcasting in remarkable numbers. The Pew Night initiative also revealed that almost every American lives within the range of at least one religious radio station, which is great news. In an area dominated by digital noise, this is a powerful reminder that radio, especially faith-based radio that you're listening to right now, remains one of the most personal and trusted forms of communication. You know, I have been in the media my entire adult career. I've worked in print media, radio, television. Radio is my number one love. I do love radio. I spent many years in the secular world. That's where I met Teresa Tamia. We both worked for ABSC affiliates in Detroit. And we met covering stories on the streets of Detroit as reporters. And radio has always been my first and love in media. Now, and I'm so blessed to be working in Catholic media today. I never would have thought I would be doing that if you told me that, 30 years ago when I started in this industry as a journalist. Teresa introduced me to Catholic radio many years ago, 20-some years ago, when she asked me to fill in for her here on Catholic Connection. And then several years later, in 2020, I launched my own radio program, Epiphany, on an affiliate of EWTN, Ave Maria Radio in Detroit, in Ann Arbor, Michigan. The surge in engagement isn't happening in a vacuum. Across the country, dioceses are reporting record numbers of adults entering the Catholic Church this past Easter. At the same time, Catholic and Christian media, radio, podcasts, live streams, and apps are experiencing unprecedented growth. We saw this when Bible in a Year with Father Mike Schmitz and Catechism in a Year with Father Mike Schmitz, right? Voices like Father Mike Schmitz and Bishop Robert Barron and Father John Ricardo continue to draw millions into deeper conversations about truth. Apps are just exploding. EWTN is growing globally in different languages, different platforms, print, online, radio, television. Faith-based media isn't just surviving. It truly is thriving. Why? Because people are seeking truth. Teresa said people are hungry for truth. Few people understand that better than our own Teresa Tamia, host of Catholic Connection on EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. She's heard on, hundreds of stations worldwide and on Sirius. Pew's research confirms what we experience every day, Teresa said. People are hungry for truth, clarity, and hope. Catholic radio continues to grow because it speaks to the deepest needs of the human heart. After decades in secular media, Teresa has become one of the most influential voices in Catholic broadcasting, an anchor of credibility in a world that often feels chaotic and confusing. Her first book was Noise. She understood this many years ago when she first started in Catholic radio. My dear friend, Teresa and I are a longtime friend. Teresa's very close to Chuck Gatica. He's a local personality here in Detroit, known nationally too as a keynote speaker. He returned to the faith and renewed a mission. He's a familiar Detroit voice we all know here. Chuck Gatica has also witnessed the impact of Catholic media firsthand. After a widely shared personal return to the Catholic Church, which Teresa's interviewed him many times, I have too, featured earlier this year, he was featured in our local publication here in Detroit, Detroit Catholic. He became a passionate advocate for faith-based broadcasting. And he said, Catholic radio provides something people desperately need, a place to encounter faith, reason, and authentic hope. In a world filled with noise, Catholic programming, like we have right here on EWTN, offers clarity and peace. Chuck Gatica journey resonates with countless listeners who are rediscovering their faith through the very platforms Pew highlights. So why does this matter for leaders, families, and communities? I've spent more than 30 years of my life in the media and communications, and now as a leadership coach and host of Epiphany, I see the impact of Catholic radio every day. Listeners aren't just turning in for information. They're seeking formation. It's not just about information, brothers and sisters. It truly is about formation. What do they want? They want trustworthy voices, clarity in a very confusing world. Only Christ gives us true clarity. Encouragement rooted in faith. Conversations that strengthen families and communities. They want hope. They want trust. They want love. They want unity. They want fellowship. They want friendship. This new research validates the essential role Catholic radio plays in forming conscience, strengthening families, and providing trustworthy information. You know, when reflecting on the Pew findings, I realize listeners rely on Catholic programming right here on EWTN because it offers clarity, it offers compassion, it offers truth in a world filled with noise. That's what we're finding. The data tells a compelling story. Faith-based radio is expanding, reaching new audiences, shaping the national conversation about faith, culture, and community. Pair that with record numbers entering the church, explosive growth in digital faith platforms, and renewed interest in spiritual formation. The momentum is unmistakable. Our radio programming isn't a relic of the past. It's a lifeline for the present and a powerful force for the future. And you can help people grow in their faith by sharing with them all the programming that we share with you here on EWTN. That's a wonderful way for you to evangelize the faith. And I kind of want to tie this into a post my sister shared with me this morning. And it's interesting, these conversations about spirituality. I hear this, I've heard people say, well, I'm not a religious person, I'm a spiritual person. Well, the demons are spiritual. We've heard priests and cardinals and bishops say this, remind us, especially those that work with spiritual warfare and exorcism as well. It's always interesting how people will call Christianity made up. This is a post. This is really interesting. While openly embracing crystals, spells, energy, astrology, manifestations, and every other spiritual idea the culture makes trendy, this issue is not that people don't believe in the supernatural anymore. The issue is that many only reject the authority of Jesus. From a Christian perspective, this reveals something deeper than a debate about religion. People are often not offended by spirituality in general. They're offended by the God who calls them to repentance, truth, holiness, and to surrender. Jesus is not just another belief system. He is Lord. And that is why the world pushes back so hard. But yet there's so many people seeking truth, and that's why they're turning to Catholic radio. The Bible says the message of the cross will look foolish to those who are perishing, but to those being saved, it's power of God. So when people mock faith in Christ while chasing every other spiritual path, it only provides the real battle has always been about truth in Jesus Christ. This is what we're sharing with you. This is what we strive to share with you every day with the guests we bring on the programming, is truth in Jesus Christ. And that's why people, more and more people, are turning to programs like EWTN because they know they're getting the truth. And you could be part of it, brothers and sisters, by sharing our programming and all the content that we share with you every single day with your friends and family. Invite them to listen to a program. Invite them to read a wonderful article. It is a simple way to evangelize the faith. We got to take a break here on Catholic Connection. I'm Vanessa Denha-Garmo, filling in for Teresa Tomeo. That's my coach's commentary. And when we come back, Dr. Robert McNamara will be with us discussing one of my favorites, Edith Stein. We're back discussing one of my favorites, St. Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, Edith Stein, understanding of the human person and her love for truth and goodness, with our next guest, Dr. Robert McNamara. Dr. McNamara, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you, Vanessa. It's a joy to be here.
I want to first understand your love for Edith Stein and what led you to this deep study of St. Teresa Benedict of the Cross.
As a young Catholic, I'd returned to the faith maybe in my early 20s, and I came across her kind of sideways as a devotional figure frequently, but her philosophy seemed too imposing to approach it from that perspective. And it was only much later then, and when I was in master's studies, that I came across her philosophical thought and really became invested then in her project in relation to the human person, the human soul, human individuality, education. So originally devotional, and then only much later, by being introduced by others to her philosophy, did I come to appreciate the great stature of her person and her thought.
And how has learning about her, studying her, and sharing her with other people, Dr. McNamara, helped you grow in your own faith journey?
Throughout the entirety of Stein's life, she seemed to be singularly focused upon truth. The question of truth always stood before her as the guiding beacon, and when she explored truth, she explored it from the perspective of the person, the soul of the person, and the education of the person. So she's uniquely capacitated then to serve our formation as persons, both in our orientation toward truth and how we come to grow, develop, and mature. And so I found her invaluable in terms of my own maturation. And then when I introduce her to students, they just take to her like ducks to water. They just really rejoice in her focus on the significance of being a person made to the image of God and what each of us can offer as individuals within the mystical body of Christ.
So, Dr. McNamara, in terms of the book, The Personalism of Edith Stein, available at EWTN Religious Catalog, what can we learn from this in terms of our own identity in Christ?
Perhaps the most significant feature of it is her focus on the individuality of the human person. So she there puts forward a very strong thesis about how we're unique, unrepeatable, and irreplaceable, that we each come forth from the hand of God in his image, but uniquely so. And she gives us a wonderful metaphor to help us understand that. The divine white light is refracted into the infinite spectrum of colour, and each of us as human persons bear one hue of that divine spectrum. And so we all have a particular character to us that's unique, unrepeatable, and irreplaceable, and therefore we have something distinct to offer to the world, human community, and in particular then our place within the mystical body of Christ.
You know, and Dr. McNamara, we were talking offline how we have such a identity crisis in the world today. You know, what kind of discussions are you having with students today about Edith Stein and the personalism of Edith Stein and as it relates to identity in the world today?
She has wonderful resources to offer this particular question, and we can focus perhaps on two of them. One is very closely associated with the name of EWTN, Eternal Word Television Network. So Stein understands our creation through the Word, and we all of us then individually bear the Word of God. You could say that when God spoke all things into being, when he spoke each of us individually into being, he spoke a particular word. And that's our distinct name, a name that we will discover in the fullness of time when we enter into his presence, God willing. So when we think of this then, that word that God spoke, that's what we have to discover. That's our identity. That's the word by which he calls us forth. That's the word he calls each of us individually to himself. And so a particular task of the human person is to begin to collaborate with God to discover who it is that he made and then live into that in a free and true way.
What are you hoping that people, the readers, will take away from the book, The Personalism of Edith Stein?
I think perhaps the great dignity of the person and the fact that we're created individually but destined for solidarity with others in community, and how we can discover then what it is to be a person made to God's image in community with others in self-giving love. I think that that's perhaps the principal message that would be carried by the text.
So we're talking today about the personalism of Edith Stein with our guest here today on Catholic Connection, Dr. Robert McNamara, discussing St. Teresa Benedict of the Cross, understanding the human person and our love for truth and goodness. And Dr. McNamara, it just seems like, you know, in this culture today that we live in, we have moved away from not just not understanding, but not even respecting the human person. You know, what are we learning from St. Teresa Benedict of the Cross about how do we engage people even in this discussion to value the human person?
I suppose it begins for Stein with seeing truly. If we really allow ourselves to be attentive to reality and not distracted by everything that attempts to fragment our attention today, we'll begin to see the great dignity of what lies before us in other persons. I think you see this most clearly when you look at little children and babies. They're a wonder that lies before us as something immense, amazing, and there's an innocence there upon which we don't want to trample. And I think that we have to take that attentive gaze that we bring to the infant and look at people in general like that. And this then will capacitate us out of a seeing truly to love genuinely, to love the persons that lie before us. The world today is particularly averse to that precisely because we've got so much distraction. with the invention of all the various new media, we haven't grappled with them appropriately yet. And I think we're all living very fragmented and splintered lives in consequence. And out of this arises the identity crisis we see today.
Yeah. Dr. Robert McNamara here with us today discussing St. Teresa Benedict of the Cross, Edith Stein. In your research, your years of research and teaching, Dr. McNamara, was there anything that surprised you about Edith Stein?
The radicality of her thought. She seems to be able to stand separate from cultural trends and prevailing interests because she's always, as I mentioned at the beginning of the interview, firmly focused upon the truth of things. And so she sees in the human person this capacity to attain truth and then a capacity to submit to the authority of truth. And she does this so radically in her own life that it makes her stand apart in distinct ways throughout her life. First as a Jewish person who stood apart and became Catholic, and then as a Catholic philosopher who stood apart and became a Carmelite sister, and then as a Carmelite sister was prepared to give her life for the sake of the church, humanity, her people, the Jewish people.
And what's been the reaction over the years when you teach about Edith Stein to students? What are some of the comments you share? And we'll probably have to take a break before we can finish that thought. But in a couple minutes before we take a break, what can you share? One reaction, one comment.
The reaction is that people are freed to be themselves, that people are freed to live as God made them to live. And there's a kind of liberation that occurs through the encounter with her thought. And that liberation has these two aspects that have already been mentioned. We do genuinely receive ourselves from God, what we are and who we are to become, and yet we have this great dignity to be able to collaborate with Him precisely in who we are to become. And so the world today has given us a very defined focus upon identity, and with it a crisis of identity, where we attempt to not only make who we are, but we attempt to form what we are. And the world has gotten it wrong in the sense that God has given us what we are, and yet we have the task of collaborating with Him in forming who we become. And that is a really liberating idea. And I think our young people today who are within this identity milieu, they find that incredibly motivating and empowering.
Dr. Robert McNamara presenting Edith Stein, Thomistic, Personalism as Unified in the Vision with which the human faith reveals the mystery of the person as both substantial what and subjective who. We'll talk more about that with our guest, Dr. McNamara, here on Catholic Connection when we come back after the break. Don't go away. We're talking with Dr. Robert McNamara here on Catholic Connection, discussing St. Teresa Benedict of the Cross, understanding the human person and her love for truth and goodness. You know, educating students for many years on Edith Stein, Dr. McNamara, and, you know, parents and educators are really competing with strong forces in the culture, moving our young people away from Jesus. And here we have a wonderful example and role model for young people who move them to Jesus. Can you kind of speak to that in terms of her love for education as well?
Yeah, so as we mentioned in the first section, Stein came before me as a figure of great integrity and a clarity of personality. And the reason for that was because of her focus upon truth. And when she was engaged in truth, she was interested first in the human person, the human soul, and then with that, education. Because as people were all set on a path of formation toward the future, and education has a defined role to play in that. Now, Stein's interest here then is a kind of compelling witness, because not only did she write about these things, not only did she teach these things, but she lived it with great integrity in her own life. And so as a teacher, she also stands in the world as a witness. And we're in great need of such witnesses today, because we live in a very amorphous culture that leads us in many confusing and stray directions. And we need to be able to hold firm to ourselves. And the exemplar of someone like Stein gives us that capacity, gives us the kind of motivation. She's a life that you could follow. She's a thinker that you could follow.
You know, and a thinker, I love the words you're using, Dr. Robert McNamara, Associate Professor of Philosophy at Franciscan University of Steubenville, and Associate Series Editor of Edith Stein Studies, is being a thinker. Because we have lost in the world, and I'm sure you have seen this as a professor, critical thinking in the world today. And Edith Stein reminds us of the importance of being a critical thinker.
Yeah, we have this amazing capacity to think. It is perhaps our most powerful power, the most powerful power of our soul, the capacity to think and thereby to attain truth. However, much of our education today tends to desensitize or numb that faculty. We simply enter into education as an ability to learn and to quantify and to calculate, and we're not really fostered in our thinking. However, then there's a figure like Edith Stein. She stands forward in history as someone who always thought, who was always attentive to reality, and really employed this power to great use. And in that way, then, she gives an example of someone who thinks clearly, thinks truly, and if we do the same, we can actually alight upon the truth together with her. The truth is accessible to us, and all we have to do is to apply this power of thought. We have to think about the world. We have to think and reflect.
Mm-hmm. And think and reflect on it, and from a Catholic perspective. I mean, we talk a lot here on EWTN that we're looking at the world from the lens of a Catholic, and Edith Stein is encouraging us to look at these issues in the world today and in modern times, right, from that lens, you know.
Yeah, her fidelity to truth drew her to the point that she encountered truth in person, Jesus Christ. And so in her encounter with the person of Jesus Christ, she found that the coming together of all of her interests, her interest in truth, her interest in personhood. And Christ then stands forward in her life as her primary anchor and orientation. And Christ leads us into the fullness of truth. And indeed, Edith Stein would have held that we can't actually come to the fullness of truth if we don't adhere to the person of Christ, for he is truth in person.
So I want to talk about Edith Stein as it relates to the study of Aquinas and Thomism. Can you kind of talk to us about that?
So her early formation in philosophy was in a method of philosophy called phenomenology, which closely attends to first-person experience in order to understand the content of what we know, how we know, what we know. Later in life, after she converts to Catholic Christianity, she encounters the thought of Thomas Aquinas. He, of course, stands really tall in the Catholic intellectual tradition, in the philosophy that we call the perennial philosophy. And so she spends the remainder of her life then attempting to synthesize this modern method of philosophy, phenomenology, with Thomistic scholasticism. She was attempting to bring these two modalities of doing philosophy into confrontation and to bring about a fruitful synthesis. And when she does so by mainly focusing on the person, and then with that a fulsome Christian philosophy.
And so what does that mean to us today? How can we relate that to the culture today?
So for Catholics, St. Thomas Aquinas is perhaps the tallest figure of the tradition. He reached such a synthesis of philosophical and theological and historical matters in his own writings that he gives us a backbone of doing philosophy and theology, and in a way coordinating the whole of the Catholic intellectual tradition. However, we have come to move forward in philosophy since the day of St. Thomas, and often our contemporaries are thinking in a different way, thinking about topics that St. Thomas didn't necessarily handle because they were interested in different things in the medieval era. And so a figure like Edith Stein, or indeed Karl Wojtyła, later Pope St. John Paul II, they come at St. Thomas from the perspective of this contemporary philosophical key. And in that way then they, I suppose, translate St. Thomas in a way that moderns can understand, in a way that our contemporaries can take to, and they apply his thought then to new philosophical questions, the questions that we are today interested in, like ones we already mentioned, that of personal identity.
So, Dr. McNamara, how do you see Edith Stein and Thomistic personalism continuing as we move forward in the future? I mean, how will we be studying her years to come?
So at the moment, the Carmelite order have requested that the Holy Father would declare her Doctor of the Church. And so I think if that happens, and I think it should happen, she will remain a figure of primary import for us, precisely because of this philosophical synthesis that she wrought. And this was an incredibly difficult task, because she was taking all of modern and contemporary philosophy and attempting to unite it with that great medieval tradition. Now, how is this of import for us today? Well, the person is unarguably the centerpiece of creation. The human person has been made to the image of God. And as St. Thomas says, the person is that which is most perfect in all nature. And so if we're going to understand anything, and if we're going to understand reality rightly, we have to come to understand what it means to be a person, what it means to be this centerpiece of creation made to the image of God. And therefore this will be a primary area of focus. What St. Thomas brings to that is a great, as I mentioned already, a backbone, a robust metaphysical presentation of the human person, what the human person is. What contemporary philosophy brings, and that which Stein adds to St. Thomas, is this attention to our experience, first-person experience, attention to subjectivity. Where St. Thomas was incredibly objective in his philosophy, contemporary philosophy is subjectively focused. Now, if we're rightly to understand the human person, we have to marry these two aspects. We have to know what the human person is objectively, and we have to know who the human person is subjectively. And then we'll have an appropriate understanding that can guide our lives, activity, and most importantly, our love of one another.
So, Dr. McNamara, can you explain what it means to be a doctor of the church for those who don't understand that and why that's so significant?
So a doctor of the church is not only a saintly figure who has exhibited by their life a clear fidelity to Christ and heroic virtue, but at the same time has taught Christian doctrine in a new and novel way. Novel not in the sense that it's utterly different than what came before, but they've drawn emphasis to new features and shown with greater clarity what these features mean in terms of our understanding of the faith. Now, what Stein adds to this great tradition, this great Catholic tradition, and the many doctors of the Catholic faith, is this, as we've focused already, the human person. She really develops our understanding of the human person and the centrality of the human person in such a way that it's going to speak to our contemporaries, it's going to speak into the eras that will unfold into the future, and as such she's going to be a stalwart figure within the Catholic faith.
How can studying Edith Stein help us understand our great potential, each of us individually?
So she approaches the human person in a layered way, and she speaks about our human vocation, our vocation as men and women, and then our vocation as an individual. And so God is calling us forward to the fullness of humanity, and this is the fullness of love, the fullness of sanctity. But he's calling us forward to that fullness in a differentiated way depending on whether we're a man or a woman. And there's then a characteristic dignity to living out the vocation that God has given us as a man or a woman. And then as men or women, there's also an individual character to our vocation. And Stein would commend that if we were to discover that, then we'd really begin to set the world on fire, to use the words of St. Catherine of Siena. If we discover what God has made each of us for individually, then we live our human and sex differentiated vocation in its fullness.
I love that. And, she has so many, I love quoting people, and she has so many wonderful quotes. And, one, she speaks to surrender, let go of your plans. The first hour of your morning belongs to God. Tackle the day's work that he charges you with, and he will give you the power to accomplish it. And, this kind of reminds me, Dr. McNamara, is that we create plans and God laughs, because he has a whole nother plan for us sometimes. And the importance of surrendering. What can we learn from her about surrendering truly to the will of God?
Yeah, this is a wonderful way to wrap up this interview, because even though Stein's philosophy and her theology is quite complex and sometimes hard to get into, her spirituality is incredibly simple. And she presents her spiritual understanding very much like a little child who's in the embrace of God or holding the hand of God. And her spirituality then can be encapsulated quite simply. If we allow ourselves to be embraced by God in the providence of the day, and if we then hold the hand of God as he leads us forward choice by choice, then we will exist in his great embrace, and then we will live out his call for us in its proper fullness. And so there's this attempt to give away all of our false desires and needs and simply attend to God's embrace and his hand. And if we do so, we'll discover ourselves as his children before his face, and we'll discover what he made us to be, who he made us to be.
Love it. And, St. Catherine of Siena's quote that you shared is one of my favorites, too. Be who God intended you to be, and you'll set the world on fire. And another one favorite of Edith Stein, St. Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, the world doesn't need what women have, it needs what women are.
Yeah.
And that speaks to this whole the idea of identity. And so I love this. A couple minutes left with you here on Catholic Connection. Dr. McNamara here this morning. What else do you want to share with our listeners?
So there's one thing you just mentioned there in terms of our sex differentiation as men and women. So Stein really encourages us to accept who we are as man, as woman, and then to live out the fullness of that in a kind of joy. And when we do so, we won't discover our masculinity or femininity as a constraint or a cultural rigidity. We'll actually discover it as something that really helps one another. So that phrase that appears in Genesis, the help, that is Eve for Adam, really the human person is a help to other human persons. And I even noticed this very recently in our little boy. We have a 3-year-old. And he goes around, as he was learning language, he would go around and say, I help. And he'd bring in groceries and various different things like that. And it just struck me at that moment that there's a deep insight in that verb choice of Genesis, that we are a help to one another. And if we live that out in accepting our gender differentiation, and then also rejoicing in it, then there will be a fruitful synthesis of life. Then marriage will be a place of joy and depth. Then families will radiate in the world, and then Catholicism will be more fully accepted, because often we have this difficulty accepting it because we don't see this example in marriage and family that we need to see it clearly.
We could have a whole nother hour discussion on just gender identity and what the culture has confused in the world. Dr. Robert McNamara, who published the book?
CUA, Catholic University of America Press.
Okay, and it's available at the EWTN Religious Catalog. Thank you so much for being with us and sharing with us the beautiful story of Edith Stein with us, and her as a wonderful role model for all of us. God bless you and all that you do, Dr. McNamara.
Thank you, Vanessa. It was a great joy to be on here with you.
Oh, great pleasure talking with you. Vanessa Den-Hagarmo filling in for Teresa Tomeo here in Catholic Connection. We're going to wrap up here on a Wednesday. We'll be right back after this. Wrapping up on a Wednesday. Vanessa Den-Hagarmo filling for Teresa Tomeo. Thank you to Dr. Robert McNamara discussing Edith Stein with us here today, this hour. And the last hour, Joan Lewis and Allison DeLuel and Father Sean Davidson, the Prophet of Fire, being with us and enabling me to share my coach's commentary here today on the rise of religious media and the importance of Catholic radio and why we have EWTN. So happy to be here. Teresa will be back in our host chair tomorrow here on Catholic Connection with Father Stephen Erisman, Shrine for Father Augustine Tolton, and she'll also be talking with Camille Pauly from Healing the Culture, and Dr. John Cuddeback on reconnecting the family. All coming up on Catholic Connection tomorrow with Teresa Tomeo back in her host chair. And I just wanted to remind you in my coach's commentary that I shared with you here today about the Pew Research study showing a surge in engagement in religious media. Pew Research Center releasing new findings earlier this year showing that nearly half of U.S. adults listen to religious radio. And it's why we're here on Catholic Radio. And this is your opportunity to evangelize the faith, introduce people to EWTN, to our programming on television, radio, and online publications. We are a wealth of resources for you. And sharing what we share with you is a way you can evangelize the faith. Thanks for tuning in. I remind my listeners always to connect, communicate, and collaborate with your Catholic community. Have a blessed day.